Good afternoon, Speaker and members of the House Governmental Affairs Committee. My name is Ashley Kennedy Shelton, and I'm the founder and president of the Power Coalition for Equity and Justice. I am a lifelong resident of the state of Louisiana. If you've ever heard me speak, I tell everyone that everything that I love is in this place, which is why I fight for the state of Louisiana, because multiple generations of my family live here, and there's a fight that's worth fighting for. One of the things that I wanted to speak on, which is very similar to my colleague at ACLU, which is that, the criteria for the redistricting process is clear, that we must first comply with federal law, which includes the Voting Rights Act, Section 2 specifically, and by not creating any additional seats beyond the 29 that we currently have, very likely violates Section 2 of the Federal Voting Rights Act. And, Louisiana has the second largest black population in the country, and this map does not create additional majority-minority districts beyond the 29. It's problematic. The math doesn't work in terms of there being true representation for communities of color. You can look at the growth of, when we look at Shreveport, we understand the role of racial gerrymandering and maps from throughout our state for many, many redistricting cycles. But there are opportunities throughout our major metros in Shreveport, Baton Rouge, and New Orleans to clearly add and expand minority voice. I heard, Chuck Snyder, mentioned that, tradition and keeping decisions in line with electeds that came before him. However, the elected officials that came before you, unfortunately, have maintained and allowed significant racial gerrymandering throughout our redistricting processes over the many times. And I did participate in the last redistricting process, which was very contentious and a very eye-opening experience 10 years ago. We did end up finding some resolution and getting to a better place. However, it was a very intense process, to say the least. We know that there's an opportunity in Louisiana to add at least 9 additional majority-minority seats. I clearly understand, as it has been stated many times today, and it's unfortunate that the political reality in our state is that no map with 9 additional minority seats can pass within this current body as it is as it stands. And so what we're saying is that even if we can't get to 9 is possible, but that certainly that when we look at our major metros, there's a possibility for additional districts. Louisiana deserves representation. We've heard many times throughout the last week that folks are trying to protect minority-majority communities or protect the black community, and there is no protection without representation. If you do not have voice or you cannot elect a leader willing to give you voice, then there cannot be any protection, and that is certainly the case for the African-American community, and it's certainly been my experience in this state. This process determines the next 10 years of what happens in our state. We currently have we're the second poorest state in the country. We have the highest amount of flight of our young people because our communities are not growing and expanding. And as we look at this work, we have an opportunity to do something that allows our state to grow and allows us to keep our young people here in our state. The Power Coalition does voter engagement work across the state of Louisiana. We have successfully, for the last 5 years, had a universe of anywhere between 500,000 to 800,000 people of color throughout this state that we are engaging, educating, and informing about elections in Louisiana. We know for sure and have data because we buy the voter file after every election to show the participation of our universe. We know that 62% or more of our universe turns out to vote for every election that we do the work of educating voters and working with them. But what it also tells me is that, nobody's talking to voters of color in some places, and that when I talk to them or when we educate them, when we give them the opportunity to understand that their voice and their vote is their power, that they do turn out. And that, again, for the last 5 years, 62% or more of that universe of communities of color throughout this state turn out. Power Coalition has also done listening sessions throughout this state. I've been in every nook, cranny, bar, community meeting across the state. And I've been proud to understand and learn and appreciate the communities of interest throughout the state. And I say that because, that 62% of the universe that, again, goes anywhere from 500,000 to 800,000 people across the state in terms of communities of color, we talk about what matters to them and what's important to them. It feels important also to acknowledge in the process that we did a lot of work around not having, split precincts. And I think that in meeting the letter of the law, of course, again, we must first comply with federal law, which means making sure that we are in alignment with the Voting Rights Act, Section 2. And so this forcing of the split precincts is concerning, because what it then does is forces Black communities into one district or another without always considering those communities of interest and the impact of dividing a community in one side or the other around this split precinct piece. But in closing, I appreciate the work that has been done. I look forward to being able to have conversation and work with all of you to add amendments that can increase increase minority majority districts on the House side. I think one of the things that I am always struck by is that when I'm in communities on the ground talking to the people in your districts, the people of this state, I'm never more surprised that we're the same. I mean, we have some philosophical differences on a couple of issues, but for the most part, the things that we love, the things that we care about, and the things that are important to us align. And so, but it's always struck me, though, when I come up here sometimes, though, that the chasm's much bigger than what I feel when I'm in communities across the state. And so I'm asking this body to really consider, are we centering constituent voice to ensure that as we think about the amendments, that we ensure that we are indeed in considering those voices. I know I participated in the roadshow. We made sure, thousands of people showed up across the state. It was exciting. And I appreciate this committee giving us that opportunity. But I think, at the end of the day, the voters of Louisiana, in particular voters of color, do not want to be disconnected from their vote and their voice. And the voice and the values of our communities are clear, that they want representation. And I ask that as this process continues, that you would continue to consider amendments that will be forthcoming from your colleagues around increasing minority-majority districts in the state.
The session will continue throughout the month of February. You can make your voice heard by telling your legislators to pass fair and equitable political districts. Go to powercoalition.org/takeaction or visit our link in bio.